Lesson 14, Net Capture, Part 2. In our last lesson, we learned the basic shapes of a net capture. So in this lesson, we are going to learn the variations of the net, or the modified net capture, to further understand its techniques. Alright, let's look at this shape. Now, this shape has appeared on the board. How do we capture these two white stones? Well, during our previous lesson, we already learned the principles of the net. First, we know that a normal ladder or Atari cannot capture the white stones. Even an Atari from this side, white would easily escape. Therefore, in situations like this, we should first consider using a net. Now, in the shapes we saw before, the net capture shapes we learned were actually quite standard and regular. For example, let's set up a similar shape in this local area. Okay, we would definitely play the net at this position because white cannot push through on either side. It acts like handcuffs or a shackle. Now, please note the shape below. This black stone has shifted by one space, but in fact, it doesn't affect the result of the net. Black still plays the net at this exact position. We see that when black plays the net here, white will try to run, and black's next move is a hang. Compared to this shape, when white pushes here, black can directly play Atari. But notice this shape. It is as if we moved this stone one line to the left. When black plays hang here now, even though it is not an Atari, please note that white still cannot escape at all. Because no matter how white struggles next, black's following move will result in an Atari. So even though black has one more liberty here, it still functions as a net. Alright, let's take a look. For example, we remove these two white stones. Okay, let's directly set up a shape like this. And see if this net capture is equally effective. If white tries to run now, black plays hang and still captures the white stones. There are certainly many similar shapes. For instance, let's set it up like this. Now, how do we use the shape of this stone to form a net? Of course, we play the net right here. Next, if white makes a solid extension or runs, we must remember to block this gap. Because if you connect here, white can Atari and push out, and white escapes, right? Therefore, we need to block this gap. Okay, this is now a very standard net shape, and white cannot escape from either side. So for the net, we must grasp the core idea, which is to set up a barrier right in front of it, preventing white from extending its liberties, trapping it like a shackle. Next, I will continue to show you a few common variations of the net. For example, so how do we capture this stone? The method is exactly the same as the previous shape. Playing a direct Atari simply won't work. Here, the ladder is unfavorable. So, we net at this position, utilizing the shape of this stone. This is still a net. Alright, let's place the stones on the side. For instance, with this stone, let's set up white like this. How should black capture this stone? Similarly, we can see that a direct Atari won't work, so we still need to seal it off in advance. This acts just like a pair of handcuffs or a shackle. We place it here using this stone as a supporting backup. Now, if white tries to run, I cut it. If he pushes, I block him. He pushes again. I block him. White is captured as well. This all falls under the category of nets, or strictly speaking, modified nets. We need to practice net shapes more. Let me give you another example. As long as I completely block off the escape route for the ladder. Right? How do we use this stone to execute a net on white? If we directly choose a ladder, you Atari here. He runs, and you'll find the ladder is unfavorable. Even with one more Atari, the ladder remains unfavorable. And if you Atari from this side, it is obvious that with stones on both sides, the ladder is unfavorable. You simply can't push further. So how do we apply a net in this shape? We can play the net at this position, utilizing this stone. Without it, if you try to net directly, he would just run and escape. Now, with this stone here, if he runs, I can Atari. If he runs again, I still Atari, successfully trapping the opponent. Net shapes are highly diverse and very interesting. I can quickly introduce a few particularly classic net captures to you here. For example, in this shape, white has stones here, and we can surround black. It is obvious at a glance that a direct Atari definitely won't capture it. White will quickly escape. So, placing it here is also a net. It is about applying a shackle one step ahead to lock it up. This way, it is useless for white to push out. Changing the move order is also fine. Both ways will capture white. So this is to show you some special net shapes and even a slightly more advanced technique, using a knight's move to net. Finally, let's set up an even more advanced net shape using a knight's move to net. We haven't discussed shapes yet. Generally, nets use a jump, but in some extreme situations, a knight's move can be used. Okay, for example, let's add a white stone on the outside. How do we capture the two white stones in this shape? This is quite difficult. Let's try applying some of the net shapes we learned previously. First, a ladder is definitely unfavorable. We learned to net directly here, but if white plays Atari and pushes, it escapes, right? Because for black here, if this stone were placed here, we could use the most standard net. But unfortunately, this stone is at this position. Once hit with an Atari, white just escapes. We also learned a similar shape, where you Atari and then net here. But notice, these three stones only have two liberties. If white runs now, black must block it. White can then play an Atari, and black is in trouble. Forced to connect, allowing white to escape again. Therefore, in this shape, directly using the nets we just taught won't work. So black's correct move is to play a knight's move here. This is a very advanced net. After black plays the knight's move, it looks like white has a lot of space to move, but in reality, white is already trapped. Let's take a closer look. If white runs straight like this, black blocks it. Next, no matter what white plays, it reduces its own liberties, right? It is very clear here. It is a standard trapped shape. Okay, if white runs here, black connects. We've actually learned this shape too, netting three stones at this position. Looks just like a standard net. Next, as white continues to escape, I will just seal it inside and block it. There is no problem. White cannot escape. White remains dead stones. White has a more advanced move, the diagonal move, but it doesn't work here. After an Atari, I can use something like a ladder to capture it directly. So, using a knight's move to net in this shape is arguably a more difficult method, but it is still a common net shape. I hope everyone can understand this type of net and grasp its essence. Finally, let's talk about the relationship between nets and ladders. Okay, in the last lesson, we learned about ladders, and in this lesson, we learned about nets. So, in what situations should we use a ladder, and when should we use a net? Actually, we have already learned about ladder breakers and nets once we have mastered these basic shapes and knowledge. We can analyze specific situations to reach the correct conclusion. For example, I'll set up another shape to explain. Okay, let's set it up like this. All right, let's look at this shape. I'll place a white stone here first, and then place another stone above white in this area. So for black, let me explain first. This is a mutually cut shape. These two white stones and two black stones are actually in a battle for life. We haven't learned the concept of a battle for life yet. It will be explained in later lessons. In short, if black cannot capture these two white stones, then these two black stones will be captured by white. So we must find a way to capture these two white stones. This is a battle for life. Next, we will make a judgment based on what we have learned. If we use a ladder now, we'll find that whether we start from here or here, this stone will act as a ladder breaker. Therefore, in this situation, we should use a net. But note one exception. For instance, if I move this white stone to this position, should black use a ladder or a net now? Notice that if we still use a net, these two black stones at the bottom only have two liberties. Now, this is the most basic concept of a battle for life, specifically a two-liberty versus two-liberty situation. Now, white plays here, putting two black stones in Atari. Next, black takes away a liberty, white takes away a liberty, and black is captured by white. So note that during a capturing race, when liberties are tight, white's next move could capture you. In such cases, we must prioritize using a ladder as long as the ladder is favorable, right? Whether I Atari here or Atari here, I will capture the two white stones. Then my two black stones will naturally be saved. So, whether to choose a ladder or a net, we just need to judge which method to use based on their characteristics in the specific situation. That concludes our explanation for this lesson.